So I see stuff in it. It just reminds me of how vibrant this block, this entire block. We used to play football on the street all the time, man. And I'll show you exactly where we played, Lee. We used to play from pole to pole. And this was one of the poles we used to play at. This was one of the end zones at this pole, and the other one was right at this pole. I mean, we go back and forth, back and forth. Or sometimes this would be one of the end zones, and then the next pole up. So this house right here, one of my best friends, Tracy Washington, lived in this house. 19 siblings in the family. He just passed away last year. That's the friend of mine I told you that had the heart transplant who passed away. So that was his house. I was there like constantly. And then right here, this house here was one of my other friends, Peter Hill. His mom and dad always took really good care of their property. Him and his sister live in that house now. And right next door where the vacant lot is, another one of my best friends, Paul Harris. That's where his family's house used to be right there. Paul and his sister, Paula, and their dad used to live there. And as I look, another friend of mine used to live in this house right here that's boarded up. In fact, when I was in the Navy, before I came back to Milwaukee, she and her kids were living in this house, and her boyfriend and somebody knocked on the door, and he answered the door, and they shot him and killed him in the 90s. And, I just look at these houses, and I have so many memories of these houses. And, another good friend of mine lived in this house right here. The Tate family, I think they still own the house. This house right here, this is Miss Foster. She was like the neighborhood nosy lady. She knew everybody's business. And that house right there on the corner, that was the house that I grew up in, Lee. Moved there when I was in 5th grade, stayed there all the way till I finished high school. And the house looks exactly the same as it did when I was a kid. Exactly the same. Same paint job and everything. Whoever owns it over the years, they've taken good care of it, because it still looks like it's in pretty good shape for the most part. This lady that lived next door to us, a single lady, she had a Doberman Pinscher that we used to be scared of all the time. And then I look at this house, not this one, but that one right there. Another close friend of mine and his family used to live in this house for a number of years. And then the house next door to it, another family that I was close with, my friend Kevin, used to live there. So actually these few houses here are some of the few on the block that are still in decent shape. But as I kind of remember growing up over here, this corner store right here, we used to spend a lot of time there. We'd buy, snacks and stuff like that there. A friend of mine used to live in this house that isn't here, this vacant house. A friend of mine that used to come down to my house and play basketball lived there also. This was a store that we used to spend a lot of time. It used to be called the Malt Shop. And we'd go there and buy ice cream, and they had literally every candy known to man. I mean, you could buy every candy you can think of in this place. So all the neighborhood kids used to be there. I think I got a lot of cavities as a result of this place right here, man. And so this place, which is boarded up, not longer open, it was one of the, the 3 kind of neighborhood stores that we used to spend time in. And then as we turned the corner here, I had friends that lived not in this house, but in this house here. One of my best buddies, a girl named Judy, her and her mom lived in this house, and now look at their house, and it's just like, and they used to always take really, really good care of their house, man. It was in immaculate shape all the time. And then as I remember over here, one of my brother's best friends used to live right here where there's no house. It's just, they tore down the house that used to be there. And, there used to be right here on this corner, there used to be a nursing home, right? Where that big vacant lot is, that was a nursing home that was there. They had a big fence around it. And I can remember when I used to go to school, my school, Keefe Avenue, was just a few blocks that way. We used to walk down here and walk past that. And one day, my brother and I were getting chased by a dog. And I jumped over the fence and didn't get bit, but he got bit. And then I looked, another boarded up house. Another vacant lot where a house used to be. I didn't really know people on this side of the block. because all of my friends are on the opposite side or on this side. But I used to be over here occasionally, and I just come back and kind of look at it, and I mean, I see this house, and it's just like, man, it just looks terrible, man. And the thing that I think about, and then this house right here on the corner obviously is gone, vacant lot. That was another one of the little mom and pop grocery stores that we used to shop in. Good friend of the family. You know, my brother and I were over here all the time because it's a block away from our house. Great family, man. Just the nicest people you could ever imagine own that store. And, you know, they were the type of people that took care of the neighborhood, man. And they were having a business that was a thriving business because people in the neighborhood had, you know, enough money that they could support, you know, 3 little mom and pop stores like within a block. And another good friend of mine here, I don't know who's in the house now, but those were 3 of my best friends. Tracy, JoJo, Stephanie used to live in that house. And in this house here, a guy that used to live there, a guy named Keith. Keith, he used to come over, and right where that driveway is, where those 2 cars are parked, that was where our basketball court was. And we used to have that basketball hoop was kind of made our house kind of the neighborhood house. Everybody used to come by and play basketball at our house. Good friends of mine lived in that house right there on the corner that's boarded up now. You know, one was really kind of my brother's girlfriend for a little bit. And her and her sister, great family. And I can remember, man, when we used to like spend the summers outside. We would be in the backyard. I spent a lot of hours in that backyard with my little army men and little army trucks and jeeps and tanks and stuff, setting up battles in the backyard. We would actually have boxing matches in the backyard. My mother bought us some boxing gloves. We would be in the backyard boxing. And actually, I want to show you the alley, because I think it's important to kind of remember this alley. When I looked at it, when I drove past the other day, I'm like, man, dude, it looks so different, because it was, first of all, it was always clean. There was never any trash in the alley ever when I was a kid. And everybody, the properties that people had were well maintained. This area right here, where this fence is, there used to be a guy who worked for the sanitation department. His name was George, an older guy. And, you know, he had some dogs. I think he used to hunt, so he had some hunting dogs. And the kids in the neighborhood were never very friendly with him, but he was always very nice to us. And he actually came and before we had the regular basketball hoop, we just got, I don't even know where we found it. We found a big piece of wood, and we made a basketball hoop out of it. We painted it red, white, and blue. My initials in one corner, my brother's initials in the other corner, and then we put a bicycle rim on it, and there was our basketball hoop, right? So what ended up happening, George would see that, I guess, and one day on his route, he found a real basketball goal, and he brought it over. He dug the hole for the pole. He put the pole in the ground. He mounted it for us. He did all of that. And that became like the first real basketball hoop, because there was a house down the street that before we did our little, you know, backboard and bicycle rim, there was a house down the street that we used to actually put bicycle rim on and shoot. And it was like, instead of it being 10 feet off the ground, because the way the garage was built, it was literally like 12 feet off the ground, so it was way too high. But it didn't matter, we could still shoot on it. And we used to be up and down this alley, man, running around. The people that had like pear trees that we used to, you know, steal the pears off their tree. And, you know, good friends of mine lived in this house here, in the house next door to it, man. And we used to spend so much time around there. Remember I told you about the store with me playing baseball, right? And I used to come, and this is a spot. This concrete wall right here, I used to draw a rectangle on that wall right there, and I would stand over here, and I would throw a baseball and try to hit it inside of that rectangle. That was kind of like my time trying to become a pitcher. I didn't have anybody to coach me anything on different pitches, but One day, I don't know, somebody gave me a baseball. I don't remember who it was. And I used to come out here in the alley by myself and just throw the ball against that concrete wall. It tore the ball up, obviously, but that was just one of my fondest memories of being a kid, man. You know, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, doing that. And we lived over here until I finished high school. And we would be all up and down this alley, man, just having fun, walking around, playing with other kids. And it looked nothing like this, man. I mean, it makes me sad to see the condition of the houses and stuff. And that was, one of my good friends used to live here, and they had a big tree, a big apple tree in their backyard, and we used to come in and take apples off their tree every year. They never cared. And, so now to see these vacant lots and how raggedy this alley is, it's just like devastating to me, man. It reminds me of how the kids who live over here now, how they use this space versus how I used this space when I was a kid. So here you have another vacant lot, all of this trash everywhere. That store, the mom and pop store, the family that lived there used to take really good care of their property. And just to see it now, it's like, man, these people are just devastated. And I remember, someone was asking me the other day, what types of jobs that people around here have when I was a kid. And, I don't know specifically what a lot of the adults did, but I know that, the A.O. Smith plant, which isn't that far from here, employed a lot of people. Master Lock, a lot of people worked at like American Can Company. So there were a lot of manufacturing jobs that kind of helped support people over here. And people had enough money that even if they weren't homeowners, if they were renters, they took care of the property that they lived in. And, we were renters. We never owned a home when I was a kid, but our house and our yard was always in good shape. We used to take a lot of pride in it, and everybody did. Everybody took care of their lawns. You never saw overcut grass or trash and stuff. And now when I look here, man, I remember sitting on Judy's porch, hanging out with Judy, and now it's like, man, dude, look at this neighborhood, man. What in the world has happened? It's just so sad for me. And a lot of great childhood memories. And it makes me think man, I feel bad for these kids that are over here now because they'll never experience what I experienced. Obviously, it's a different time and all those other things, but the way that the neighborhood you grow up in looks says a lot about how you feel about yourself. I think it makes you feel either good or bad, because if you grow up and you see the neighborhood in this condition, I don't know how as a kid you could really enjoy yourself a lot, because you shouldn't have to live around stuff like this, man. It doesn't mean that the people over here are bad. It's just that it means that people over here are just struggling economically. And, we would sit on this porch here, man, and we would play on this sidewalk right here. We would play red light, green light, stop. We would play Simon Says. We'd be out in the middle of the street racing each other. Just so many just positive memories. Former elected official Polly Williams used to live right just a few houses down from that house on the corner, just a few houses over. Her and her daughters were good friends of mine. And I wonder what they would think if they came back over here now and saw what it looked like, man. It's so sad. Mr. Strayhorn here always had the nicest lawn in the neighborhood. I mean, his lawn was immaculate. It looked like a golf course every year, and he still takes really good care of his property. Ended up finding out that his grandson is actually the husband of a good friend of mine now, and never knew him when we were growing up over here. I'm a little bit older than him, but all these years later, it's like, oh yeah, Mr. Strayhorn, who is good friends with my brother. My brother used to know all of the older people in the neighborhood. He just befriended a lot of the older people. He's good buddies with Mr. Strayhorn. Used to go over and help him do his lawn. And now the look, man, it's just like I said, the one thing that's kind of crazy to me is that the house looks almost exactly the same. Same paint job and everything. And we lived upstairs and downstairs in this house. The landlord was refurbishing the house, so we had to move from downstairs to upstairs while they fixed up the downstairs. And it was just kind of a lot of fun memories of living on both floors of this house. And the neighbors we had upstairs before we moved upstairs, a lady named Mavis and her kids, we used to have a lot of fun playing with them. And then once we moved upstairs, another family moved in downstairs. A woman who had actually three kids, two boys and a girl, and her son. Her son Paul was like my little buddy, man. He was like my little brother. Used to have a lot of fun playing with him and kind of being his big brother and playing with him in the yard and all that kind of stuff. And just a lot of fun memories. And up in the attic, my brother had like a weight room up there. Him and his buddies used to be up there with their weights, lifting weights. And when we lived downstairs, the basement was our space. And so, we used to have we called it a bike shop. So we would find bike parts everywhere, right? And so anytime somebody had problems with their bikes, they would bring it over to our house. And, oh, man, yeah, we've got a new rim for you. Put the rim on it. Put a new pedal, a new chain, whatever. So we had like a bike shop. Everybody used to come over here to kind of get their bikes repaired. And it was just a cool place, man. And I can remember cutting the grass. And my memory is that yard was a lot taller than it was, pushing that lawnmower up that little hill in the yard. Now I'm looking and it doesn't look like it's all that big, but when I was a kid, it seemed like it was really large. But just kind of remember, and one of my favorite pastimes as a kid, I love thunderstorms, man. I used to love to just kind of come out on the porch and watch when there were thunderstorms and just kind of see the clouds and the wind and the rain and stuff. And, in the summers when it was hot, a lot of the parents used to come outside and sit on the porch and kind of watch the kids run up and down the street and play and stuff. And like I told you once before, we used to, kids get into fights every now and then. You have a fist fight with somebody and next day, your best friends again and all that other stuff. But I think about what happens now if two guys get into a fight now. Well, guess what? Somebody's going to call the police. Somebody's going to get arrested. Somebody's going to go to jail. Somebody may even go to prison just for a simple little fist fight or something that people used to have on a regular basis. And I don't remember ever seeing the police. The police were never around. I tell people, I hear these stories of the police driving around and giving kids baseball cards. I don't ever remember the police giving me any baseball cards. I used to collect baseball cards. I actually used to buy them down the street at the malt shop. They had, the bubble gum with the baseball cards in it. So I used to buy those and collect those baseball cards. The two times I remember seeing the police that I remember very vividly is once this guy who had some mental health issues, he came into the malt shop and tried to rob it at gunpoint. And one of my best friends was in there, and she snuck out and called the police. And, they cordoned off the area, and everybody was kind of very nervous. And eventually, they talked the guy down, and he ended up taking him out to the, mental health clinic. But I remember that was the only time I ever saw the police actually doing police work in the neighborhood. And the other time I remember having, kind of close encounter with the police was like a block. Well, the next block up is like a really long block. So the block between Concordia and Keith. And I can remember when I was in like 6th grade, the police had this huge, I don't know what they called it, some police wagon. It looked like a big, gigantic RV, right? And they were there, and they invited the kids to come in, and you could kind of see like the science of policing and all that. They had a little display there for you. And I could remember that they were taking everybody's fingerprints. I remember being fingerprinted when I was in 6th grade on that thing, and I don't remember why they did it. I think they were like, well, we want to get everybody's identities in case somebody comes up missing or whatever. Something like that. But I can remember very clearly, those are the only 2 times I remember having encounters with the police when I was a kid growing up. And it was just a great neighborhood to live in. It was safe. The parents, half the time, they didn't know where we were, but they never worried about us because they knew that everybody looked out for each other. Everybody was working, gainfully employed for the most part, and a pretty decent job. And you had enough disposable income that you could do stuff with your kids and enjoy the fruits of your labor. But I look now and I just think, man, some of the people that I knew growing up over here, that guy that was a really good friend of mine, I ran into him a number of years back, maybe about 4 years back. I was driving through and I saw him. I got out and we hugged it up and talked and stuff. And he was one of those guys that was like, his family, they were really into church, and they were like, they were in church 3 times a week, so they were really, really very, very strongly religious family. And man, I remember just his life was so different when I saw him that time. He had been shot, lost one of his eyes. He had struggled with drug addiction, just had a really, really difficult adulthood, and just so completely different from what you thought he would be when he was a kid growing up over here. And then so many other people, man, that I've heard about during the 80s, after I had left, once I went into the military. A lot of drugs kind of came into the community, and it became very competitive for selling drugs, and a lot of violence came along with that. People fighting over drug territory, and a lot of kids, man, that I knew ended up getting shot or either going to prison, and it was just like so different. When I came back to Milwaukee, I was gone for about 10 years altogether, and when I came back to the neighborhood, man, it was like a different place. It was like a hurricane had hit the neighborhood. And it still looked pretty decent, though. I mean, in the 90s, when I first came back, the houses were still in pretty good shape. There weren't any vacant lots. There weren't any boarded up houses. And it was a difficult time economically. The neighborhood was still struggling, but people were still doing fairly well. But now when I look back on it, and like I told you, I had driven past, I come over to the neighborhood every summer. And when I came over last week, it was the first time I really paid attention and looked very closely at the block that I live on, and thought about the houses of friends and the vacant lots, and remember who used to live in those houses that used to be there and stuff. And it was very sad for me, man. It really made me kind of think, like, what is it like for this neighborhood to go through this transition, and for people to kind of talk about, the 53206 zip code, which is a huge zip code. I mean, it's a massive amount of area, and to hear people talk about it all the time and talk about how horrible it is, and then to not kind of give the backstory of what happened to it, how it transitioned into what it is today. And that's the thing that bothers me the most when I hear conversations about 53206 and all of the issues it has. Nobody kind of talks about the jobs that went away for the people that lived in the neighborhood. The gangs coming into the community. The drugs coming in. All of those things that kind of helped devastate the area. And then the Great Recession. The Great Recession, I'm sure, is why so many of these houses on this block now are not owned. I mean, there's only two. I think there's 3 houses on the block that are owned by the people that live in the houses. There are several that are owned by the city of Milwaukee. The vacant lots are owned by the city of Milwaukee. There's one family that bought a house on this block in 1986. They're the oldest people, or the oldest homeowners on the block. There's another person who bought their house in like 1996, I think. So that one family's owned it over 30 years, the other one over 20 years. But the rest, the people, are renters. So there's a lot of landlords, like little LLCs and stuff, own the houses. And it's just so different. The neighborhood. And it's like I think I told you that when I came over the last week, it was the middle of spring break for the kids. Yeah, I remember in spring break for us, man, and it's a warm day, man. All of the neighborhood is full of kids outside playing and doing. And now it's like a ghost town. I saw 4 kids that were walking, and they cut through one of the vacant lots when I saw them walking last week, and it's just like they just looked like they were so sad, man. Like they weren't enjoying life at all, And I just remember, as kids, man, it was just full of joy all the time, because we were allowed to be kids, and our families took care of us, and the neighbors took care of us. That whole idea of community, it just seemed like, how can you have a community when you have people who are constantly moving from place to place? That's one of the big things I don't think people get about, like, what people refer to as the hood or the ghetto or whatever people want to call, whatever negative terms people want to use, is that those neighborhoods, even though black people were highly segregated and forced to live in specific neighborhoods, they made the best of it, and they built community, and they thrived as kind of a community because everybody knew each other. People weren't constantly moving in and out of the neighborhood. It was rare for new families to move in, and typically if they had kids, the kids in the neighborhood would compete to see who would be friends with them first. And now it's like, it's just so different, man. People don't know each other. People live in a neighborhood, live right next door to each other, right across the street from each other, don't know who the neighbors are. It's just such a different environment now. And I feel probably the most emotional piece for me about it is just remembering all of the kids in the neighborhood and how they used to come over to our house, like, all the time, to fix their bikes, to play basketball, or just to hang out, watch people boxing in the backyard, all those things. And now I wonder, like, is there a house around here where the kids in the neighborhood kind of gravitate towards? I doubt that there is, because people are so protective of their kids and they don't let them play outside like they used to. And it's just like these kids, man, they're living in a different world. And I talk to younger people who, this guy that I talked to just last week, this guy kind of moved to Milwaukee in the 90s. So he's a younger guy, and talk to him about what the neighborhood used to be like, what Milwaukee used to be like. And it's like he can't imagine it. It's like he's like, dude, I can't see Milwaukee being the place that you are describing, that so many other people I've talked to have described to me. I just can't see Milwaukee being that, and because it's so different now. And those are the things, I think, the stories, a lot of times you kind of look back with rose-colored glasses on your childhood, but I really don't think, because my best friends and I, the guys that I grew up with, that I'm still really close to now, we always tell people that we've been friends since we were like 11, 12 years old. We're still friends now in our 50s. So 40-some years we've been friends, and we talk about our childhood and the things that we did, and we're like, we wouldn't trade our childhood for anybody's childhood. We would freely ride our bikes all over the city. We would walk together, playing basketball. We'd go from different park to different park, challenging people to play basketball, riding our bikes down to the lakefront on a regular basis every summer, never being harassed by the neighbors over there, never being in fear of somebody calling the police on us or anything like that, because you don't look like you belong in this neighborhood, stuff like that. It was just a sense of freedom that we had, and that loss, that transition. I'm actually kind of glad I wasn't here to kind of see the transition in the mid 80s through the early 90s, that transition of the drugs coming in and all that stuff. I'm glad I wasn't here to witness that, because it would have been really sad to see, friends of mine being shot and other stuff like that. But it just kind of reminiscing on living over here, man, and I talked to my mother about it the other day, and just like, it was just such a great neighborhood, man. And the major thing that changed, like I said, is people lost those family supporting jobs. A lot of people here are still working. There are a lot of unemployed people around here, and a lot of people that are working low wage jobs, minimum wage, $7.25 an hour is just ridiculous. You work 40 hours a week, you're gonna make $15,000 in a year at minimum wage, which is absolutely shameful that the minimum wage hasn't increased in 9 years. And this is what people who live outside of these neighborhoods, who live outside the city of Milwaukee, this is what they don't get. If you lived in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood you lived in went through that same transition, all of the high quality jobs, the family supporting jobs, suddenly disappeared without you having any control over it. And the increased level of poverty in the neighborhood and all of the things that come along with that. If that happened in any other neighborhood, people would be like, man, this is what happened, and this is why a neighborhood looks like it does. But instead, people, they point the finger or blame at the people in the community and say, well, you know, those people aren't doing this, and they should stop doing that, and if they would just do this instead of that, and blah, 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 blah. It's like without understanding the bigger forces behind the transition in Milwaukee and the loss of tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs that impacted the central city in 53206, you know. It's just so different, man. I spent most of my childhood living and playing and spending time in 53206 because it's such a big area. You know, most of the people that I knew lived in 53206. And most of the parks that I would go to play basketball at, or the neighborhoods we ride our bicycles through, or neighborhoods we walk through, you know, it was all within 53206 for the most part. And it's sad to see what it looks like now. Sad to see the decline in the neighborhood, the businesses that used to be over here that, you know, we used to support, to see those businesses gone. And, you know, there's a gas station not far from here. We used to go and fill up our bicycle tires. That gas station is long gone. There was a black-owned gas station. I think there's only one black-owned gas station left in the city of Milwaukee now. And it's just so different, man. It's just really, it's just devastating from my perspective to see that it looks like this and understand the dynamics behind it, and to know that most people just, they don't even think about it. You know, it's like 53206 is like an afterthought to most people. Most people who, you know, have conversations about it and talk about 53206 and, you know, the incarceration rate and all those other things about the zip code. These are people that don't have a clue about what happened to the neighborhood. And they never contextualize that. You know, the documentary, the 53206 documentary, you know, which was supposed to tell you about the neighborhood, it didn't contextualize what happened. It didn't tell you what the neighborhood used to look like. It just told you that, well, this is what it is now. And if you didn't know any of the backstory, like what I've shared with you, if you didn't know any of that, you would think this neighborhood has been like this forever. But really, it hasn't been this way forever. It used to be so different. And that's what I want people to understand. It used to be a great place to live, a great place to raise your kids. And the fact that it isn't anymore, it's just, you know, it's very sad to me. But, you know, you have people here that are doing what people in every neighborhood do. They get up every morning, go to work, take care of their families, take care of themselves, pay their bills, do all of those things. But they just do it under different circumstances. They do it, you know, by living in a neighborhood that the city just really, for decades, just did nothing for the most part, allowed it to disintegrate. And as I analyze the data for the houses on the block, I look back at the, you know, the property values in 2006, which is as far back as you can go online, and the average house on this block was, I think, assessed at like 44,000, somewhere between 44 and 45,000 per house, right? But today, the average assessment is about $25,000 per house, and there's one house that's only not even $12,000 is the assessed value of it. And so these houses have lost, you know, a significant amount of value, and they look terrible, not because the people here are terrible people, but because you can't get loans to do home improvement and stuff in this area. Nobody's going to give you a loan for that. It's just sad, man, that it's kind of like a forgotten neighborhood, and people in Milwaukee take a great deal of pride in talking about Milwaukee and all the development that's occurring with the Bucks Arena and all these other things. And then it's like, dude, but what about these neighborhoods like this? What are you doing to make these people's lives better? What are you doing to increase their ability to have a better life? Are you doing anything about the minimum wage? Are you trying to increase the minimum wage? Are you trying to create more high-quality jobs in the city of Milwaukee that these people can work in? Because there's so many, you know, blacks in Milwaukee that are forced to leave the city of Milwaukee every morning and go out to the suburbs to find work, because there's not enough good jobs in the city of Milwaukee. a lot of the jobs here are service sector jobs that don't pay very good money, and you have, people that go in and out, in and out, in and out of these neighborhoods regularly because, well, man, I can't afford to pay the rent. I don't want to get evicted because once I get evicted, it's practically impossible to find a place to live. And so you have this transition of people in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And that leads to you not having cohesiveness and relationships between the people on the block. The children don't get to know each other. The parents don't get to know each other. It's like a loss of community. It's just now like just an area with just people living in it that just, they don't know each other for the most part. I'm sure people know some of the people around, but kind of what I've noticed when I come over and visit, friends of mine that still live on the block, is that they tell me that, man, I don't know who those people are. Those people moved in last month. I don't know who those people are. It's like, we used to know everybody. Everybody knew everybody. And now it's like, nope, don't know too many people.